No, I mean, they all wanted. So yes, I think he's excited about that. But yeah, they all wanted, and they all acted really interested.
Sometimes you go there.
Oh no, they were all very, because I'm doing something in the street and in a series. So, they all interesting. Very interesting. I mean, I was shocked. No, it's more than me. I think it's a rough draft, but it's not because I'm just giving it to her spots and she's really complimentary. So I'm feeling really good about it. My problem, my weakness right now. Oh, I mean, it's like if we meet in September, I would meet somebody that should be like what she said, like, I know personally in most video.
Oh, well, that.
It is. Yeah. I've got 4 books. Oh, but every time my editor, she basically helps me. She literally sits next to me and helps me push the right buttons to put it in film.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not, I mean, and then she sits next to me while I'm Amazon and put it to no, not lighting source. Oh, they go smart. So no, they don't charge anymore.
No. I mean, I only have one. I have one. It's the one that and I have to sell it at several dollars higher than I sell it anymore. In order to even make a royalty, my royalty.
I'm doing very lovely because I have several bookstores that are selling. No, I have, and I have.
Well, maybe
no, I'm not doing anything digital. I'm not making money digital.
Okay.
I'm making print because I have bookstores selling it. And
selling. Well, so what's
$18.99?
Oh, yeah. To me, that's a lot of money.
Oh, well,
I sell my books for $12. Actually, it just bumped to $230.
no, my late fee was $16.99, but people were. I had in person signing.
Oh,
people were.
Yeah, that's great if you can get it. I personally.
But I had people voting in New Jersey to see it. Place I had it in Ancient City Boardwalk. Years.
And you're gonna have, and maybe you can buy it, but I find that, I don't want it.
See, I'm the opposite. I feel like if it's worth reading, you're really gonna have fun reading it. It's worth that money. I'm never gonna read now. We'll start this series. This is a series. but
But I wouldn't make the first one go to three, and so you have more than two.
like 5 or 4.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
book I've given away free is I have my series for this and I didn't do the first one until all 6.
Yeah, I might like to then. My attitude, apparently, computers out there, but my attitude is if it's free.
The problem is, like, I probably
not worth
have
it.
10,000 downloads. For the book, but the rest of the series certainly doesn't get even a fraction of it. So most of it.
I know.
Because if it's free,
Exactly.
it is, like you said, it's not worth it, so it's like, oh, yeah. okay.
I've stopped taking any free ones because I'm like,
I've never.
I have enough that I pay.
Unless it's somebody that I know what I want to book.
Yeah.
And they're offering free, I'm like, "Oh, great, I'll grab it." But then, of course, if it's something else.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So anyway, I guess the time.
We are.
It's late message.
All right.
What do we, excuse me, what do we do now? Do we just, with these people, do I just introduce Kari? Okay, so break's over.
I'm all.
I guess. And Kari, you want to stand over here so we can see? All right, here she is. Okay. So she's always been a voracious reader, and her favorite, of course, has been romance for the happily ever after. And she's written a series, or more than one.
I have 25 books right now, 6 different series.
6 series. Okay, so she's an expert on that, and so we're lucky to have her here. She spends the summers in New Hampshire, and then the rest of the year she's just moved back to St. Augustine. So we are about to learn all about writing a series, which I'm excited for. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right, can everybody hear me? Yes. All right. All right, so writing a series, as Maggie said, I do have 6 series currently. 2 of them are finished. The others are in the process. What I'm going to tell you today, these are all suggestions. There's no one right or wrong way to write a series. Sometimes people do it very differently. I'm just going to give you some general guidelines. So the first thing I want to talk about is the different types of series, because there are all sorts of different types of, so this right here is our outline as to what we're going to do. We're going to talk about types of series, brandings, tools, struggles, etc. Okay, so one of the first types of series is siblings. So I'm just showing you, here's one, the Cates brothers, Climax, North Carolina. Oh, so my fonts, okay, I'm going to apologize because it looks like I transferred, I'm using somebody else's computer and the fonts are off. So that should say Lee Kilrain. So siblings is one, family is another. Yep. Okay. So the font, sorry about the fonts. The names are all over the place because it was a different computer. Okay. So Storms of New England, that's one of my series. This is family. It will eventually be 10 books. It's 10 cousins. So there are 3 brothers. They each have a number of kids. So you've got your family. They're all from the same fictional town in New Hampshire. The next one, town. So you can have a town. And so this series right here by Donna Allward takes place in this little town. And so it's different people from the town. That's how they're connected. So when you write a series, you have to figure out, how are these books connected? That's what writing a series is they're connected books. Friends, you can have this one by Gail Chianese. And we're going to talk about titles later, but actually, so if you look on this, The House on Blackberry Hill, Treasure on Lilac Lane, Summer on Lover's Island. This one right here is Bachelorette for sale, boyfriend for hire, fiance for keep. So we're going to talk about titles a little bit later. So this is three best friends who are in this series. This one right here is Work. This is another series of mine, Ranges of Acadia. Acadia National Park up in Bar Harbor, Maine. These, each book is about one of the park rangers in Acadia National Park. Team, okay, this is another one of my series, my Love on the Line series. This is romantic suspense. These six guys were all in the same military unit together. So it's kind of like a band of brothers type of thing. This one here, Monica McCabe, this is by theme, her Jewel Intrigue series. They're not necessarily connected. It's not the same people, but each book has, as you can see, Diamond, Legacy, Emerald, Fire, Phantom, Pearl. You have this theme of gems, and there's some sort of a big adventure where they go off trying to find this missing gem. The Darkest Court is an overlying arc. Okay, so this series right here by M.A. Grant, who is my critique partner, by the way. So this is three brothers, but instead of just being standalones where, yes, you can read each one and there's a happily ever after for the romance part of it, there is an overlying arc here where at the beginning, you know, this is paranormal war is coming, you know, to the summer and winter court. You know, then the war comes and et cetera, et cetera. So you have this overlying arc. So you kind of have to read all three. A lot of times if a series can be connected and you have to read all of them, or sometimes it can be connected, yet each book is a complete standalone and you don't have to read any of the others. Like with this one here, you would definitely need to read the others. Agents Irish and Whiskey by Layla Rain. This is the same characters. So it's the same two men. They are FBI agents, and there's all sorts of adventure and intrigue and whatnot going on. So you have a romance, but it has to go through all three books before you get to, you know, the final, where they're definitely together and it's going to be great. Okay, so this series right here, I apologize for the font. It's Love Conquers None, okay, by Kilby Blades. These books right here, the first book is completely written in the female's point of view, and then the second book is a continuation, but it's an alternate, it's the guy's point of view. Okay, so it's one of those things where the first book ends, but it actually doesn't end happily ever after. He actually leaves. And then, I'm sorry if I spoiled it for you, but I would want to know. Second book starts after he leaves and continues on. All right, so those of you who are doing the series, so this is what is called a map, a multi-author project or multi-author series. Okay, so this is one that I had gotten involved in. My book is Tabitha on the bottom. Always a Bridesmaid is actually, it's a sister series. The first series we did was called Last Man Standing. And as you can see, all of the covers are very similar. They've got the same branding. So this Always a Bridesmaid was each of us who wrote in Last Man Standing then had, you know, a sibling or a friend or somebody else connected to the first one who was always a bridesmaid, never a bride. And that was kind of the theme. So the way that these are done on Amazon, you can click on the, you know, series, and it will take you to all of these, but every single one of them is written by a different author. Now, this series here, we each, we had somebody make the cover. One person made all of our covers so that they were very uniform. But we all did our own editing and formatting, and we all downloaded it ourselves onto Amazon. We made all of the profits. So that's a little bit different from somebody else. I assume the one that you're doing, if the profits are going to the group, then one person would be in charge of putting them all that way. All right. Another type of multi-author series that you could do is on place, and that's what I think you guys are doing. As you can see, so this is Last Chance Beach Romance. I've got a couple of books. My books are Secrets Under the Sun, Masquerade Under the Moon. I had another one too. It's just not on here. And this is where it's a town. Last Chance Beach is an island off the coast of someplace tropical. It's fictional. So whereas this right here, Always a Bridesmaid, none of these books are related to each other. The only thing that is the same is that they all have that same theme of always a bridesmaid. It's, you know, the main character is one of those people, you know, for instance, mine is, she's the preacher's daughter. And a lot of times when people come to the church and they want to get married, she, you know, she has a little, you know, dress in the closet that she puts on so that she can be the, you know, the maid of honor, so to speak. So she's always the bridesmaid. But none of these books are related to each other. In this book, I mean, in this series, whereas most of the books are very separate, we have mingled some of the people, and we definitely have a lot of the same places. There are 2 big hotels on this island. A lot of people use them. We have, you know, there's a lighthouse, and it was a lot of work. And we have, and for those of you who are doing this, you need to have some sort of, you know, several documents that take place that tell you what are the different, you know, what are the different places to go eat on the island? What are the, you know, for us, there's a lighthouse. And if one person invents something about it, I said it was haunted by the ghost of Cornelius Wiley, who was one of the, you know, lighthouse keepers way back in the 1800s. And most of the time people know he's there because they can smell his cigar. So that's something that you have to keep in the series. So you have to make sure, if you're working on this, that you really coordinate with other people. So there's definitely pros and cons of doing a multi-author project. It's a little bit more difficult when you're doing a place, because you have to make sure that, you know, you in one book, if somebody says, you know, this is right next door to this, and then in the other book, it's like, oh, they got to get in the car and they have to drive 10 minutes. That's a problem. All right. So we're going to move on to branding. Does everybody know what branding is? Pretty much. So branding is basically making it so that things fit. If you notice, all of those series that I went through, they all had similarities to them. The covers all had similarities. So you want to make sure that, you know, that you have some of the things that are the same. Okay. If you're making covers, you want to make sure that, you know, the fonts are the same, maybe some of the colors are the same. Inside, when you're doing formatting, I know for me, every series that I have a little picture, like an icon for a chapter heading. And so for the entire series, that chapter heading is the same for every book in that series, but it's different for another series. Okay, so planning ahead. So some of the things that you want to think about ahead of time is how many books are going to be in the series. Now, this doesn't have to be written in stone, because sometimes my Rangers of Acadia series, I was like, okay, I got 3 people, this is what I'm going to do. And then when I wrote the last book, there was a secondary character who was like, hey me, what do you think? Am I good? Huh? You know, sometimes you get those characters who do that. And so I'm like, okay, maybe I'll have a story for you too. But figuring out what is your subgenre, okay? Because, you know, we know most of us write romance, but is it going to be historical or contemporary paranormal, or is it going to be, you know, rom-com, or is it going to be more suspensey? So there are lots of things that you need to plan ahead. And again, one of the, you know, if you're going to put like a chapter title, make sure that you're going to be consistent throughout, so that the formatting is the same on each book. All right, so I just want to talk a little bit about titles, okay, and how to choose your titles. So if you notice this series right here, Triple Threat, Triple Time, Triple Dare, Triple Score, okay? So that's a title where they took one word and they repeated it, and then they just added another word. My Storm series is the same way. I have Elusive Dreams, True Dreams, Broken Dreams, Stolen Dreams, Deadly Dreams. Okay, so, and that's one way. Sometimes it's difficult, though, to come up with a word that's going to be the same. This one right here, Marianne Rice did it with numbers. So she's got 10 million fireflies, 1,000 sunsets, 100 wishes, and 1 unexpected gift. So she, so the titles have that same number part in them. This one right here, this is my Last Chance Beach, Secrets Under the Sun, Masquerade Under the Moon, Solace Under the Stars. Takes place on this beach, so sun, moon, stars, and then I added to it. All right, so I'm just going to show you, this is a little brainstorming session that I had with a couple of, I have like a team of people who help me out. And so when I was trying to come up with a title for this book, this was only my second book. I had Wildcard Undercover, Running Target, Fatal Evidence, Hidden Betrayal, Death Race, and Tactical Revenge. And those are my suspense books. So one of the things that I did is, if you look up at the top, I just put a bunch of words out. Here are the words that can be used in this, you know, in this book. So we each threw out a bunch of possibilities. Now, that series, each of the titles is 2 words. It's, you know, adjective and a noun, you know. So as you can see, Covert Family, Mob Target, Covert Liaison, Agent on the Run, Risky Secrets, yada, yada, yada. So in this, I actually just cut and pasted. We had gone on a Google Doc and we were kind of like talking back and forth to each other. So, and then what I did afterwards is I went on to Amazon and I Googled books to see if there were other books with that title. And just because there's another book with that title doesn't mean that you can't use it. You just want to look. If the book is, you know, brand new and it's by a big name author, yeah, you probably want to choose something else. But if it's a book that, because I think here, Running Target, if you look like right here, the first green one, there was another book, but it was from like 10 years ago, and it was like espionage. It had nothing to do with romance, and you know, it didn't sell a lot of copies and whatever. So I'm like, oh, okay. And it really fit the story. So that's what I ended up using. So anyway, this is just a brainstorming way to come up with titles. All right. I don't know if I'm going too fast or too slow. All right, so tools. There are so many different tools. just right here, you have tools to plot with. You've got Plotter and Pinterest and Scrivener, Google Docs, Dabble, Noveler, Trello, Excel, Scapple, Eon Timeline. These are all great things, you know, to help you when you're just trying to figure out your story. To edit, Grammarly, Pro Writing Aid, AutoCrit, also the Word Read Aloud. So if you go into Word, that you can actually click on, I'm not even really sure what it is, one of the review things, and it will read you the story, and you can change the voice from female to male. You can make it go faster and slower. And I used to send my books to my Kindle to edit them, which still works too, but then I discovered this and I'm like, oh, so it will actually read it to you. And I actually pick up more because if I have the word them instead of then, it, you know, the reader is saying it and you hear it more, because sometimes those are the things that you miss because your eyes just go right over it.
Are you saying that's in Word?
That's in Word, yes.
Really? How do you find that option?
Oh, okay, so you've used it, yeah, under review, it will actually say read aloud. You click on that, and then over on the right, a little thing will pop up, and you can click on like tools, and it will drop down, and it will tell you if you want male or female.
Wow, okay, thank you.
And then
That's
there'll
very
be a
helpful.
little toggle, so you can toggle it for faster or slower.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
honestly, I've done that for my last couple of books, and it has worked really great. And then marketing. So there's a lot of Canva, BookBrush, PowerPoint, Photoshop, GIMP, Deposit Photo, Pixabay. If you don't know what Pixabay and Deposit Photo, places that you can get pictures. Pixabay are free, but you have to be really careful because supposedly they say you can use them, but you might not be able to use them, like say on a cover. So I'm more likely if I've got some sort of a, you know, just an ad or a whatever, you know, a little meme, I might use Pixabay. But if I'm using something that's going to be out there, definitely my covers, I use Deposit Photo because you actually have to pay for those.
What's GIMP?
So GIMP is a free version of Photoshop. So I had it years ago and I had played with it. But like Photoshop, it's very, I mean, it has all of those layers. It's very, very technical, very whatever. But it's a free version of, it's not Photoshop, but it's a Photoshop-like thing, but it's free. And if you like Photoshop and you know how to use it, then it would probably be great for doing things. Honestly, I use PowerPoint a lot because the new, like, you know, Windows 11 or whatever I have, the PowerPoint, I mean, you can do, so like you can fade, you can blur things, you can remove the background, it does so much. So I still use, I'm old school and I will still use PowerPoint for a lot of things. I mean, I make my covers mostly on BookBrush, but sometimes if I need to do something, because BookBrush won't crop pictures for whatever weird reason, I'll go and I'll do that on, you know, PowerPoint. And then, you know, for the tools, Plotter, Pinterest, you guys all know what Pinterest is. Okay, Scrivener is a writing tool. It's what I use exclusively. Google Docs. I mean, there's so many different, I don't know about some of these. I just basically, I know I've heard people use some of them. All right, so here is my Pinterest, and you can use Pinterest. This one's just general. I've got heroes, I've got heroines, I've got, you know, because you have like boards, places, villains, babies, dads. So what I do is, you know, sometimes I go online and I'll just add a bunch. It's like, oh yeah, here's a good looking guy, here's a interesting looking woman, blah, blah, blah. And I throw them into my hero, my heroine, or sometimes I'll throw them into my villain, or whatever. And then, you know, so here's part of my hero board. When I'm ready to start a new story, I go into my Pinterest hero board and I go shopping. So it's like, okay, who is gonna end up in my book? And honestly, for me, I know a lot of people say, oh, I have a friend, oh my God, I love her dearly, but every character in her books looks like Chris Hemsworth or Captain America, every single one. And it's like, oh, honey, just stop, you know? I prefer to actually, when I have a, you know, an inspiration for my character, I rarely choose a celebrity. Usually it's some sort of, you know, model or whatever, or it's a celebrity that I don't know, because I don't watch TV. I haven't watched TV in, oh God, 6-7 years. I don't even own a TV. So I don't know what the TV shows are now or what the movies are. I don't have cable. I don't go on any of the Netflix or so I have no clue. So sometimes I might choose somebody, and you know, my daughter would, oh yeah, that's so and so from such and such a show. I'm like, oh, okay. I prefer for my characters for me to know, for me to create them in my mind. And then when I write them, I want people to use their own imagination to create them. So, and then, you know, here I've got another one. So I've got a Pinterest board for each of my series. So this is my Storms of Humanity series. So the sign kind of second row from the right, it says the falls at Squamscott River. The town that they are from is Squamscott Falls, which is the original name of a town up in New Hampshire. So, and then I go further, and then I have a board for each of my books. So lots of ways. And Pinterest is just, it's just a way to get visual stimulation, visual inspiration. Okay, the next thing that I use a lot is Scrivener. And I know I've offered before, if anybody has Scrivener or wants to get Scrivener and wants help, I mean, that's something that I am a firm believer in Scrivener, using it for years and years. It takes a little bit to figure it out. But one of the things I love about plotting, so as you can see here, they have this bulletin board, okay, or the cork board. And on it are little tiny index cards. And you can color code the index cards with different things. You know, if you look on the left, that's your binder. I actually have a different sub-document for every scene in my book. And you can see on the left, it says chapter 1, 1B, 1C, 2, 2B. And then the colors are, is it in the female's point of view? Is it in the male's point of view? This one here is, you can see it says final draft. You can write on the cards saying that it's, you know, rough draft, first draft, revised, et cetera, et cetera. So that, you know, like when I start going through, I can't revise or edit an entire book all in one day. But then it's like, okay, where did I stop? So this way I can just write across it. Yep, I've done final draft. The other ones would have nothing on it, or it would say revised or something like that. All right. So another thing that I use Scrivener for is my Bible, my series Bible. Okay, so I've got pictures. You can put pictures of everybody. I've got Hans and Ingrid are the grandparents. They've got 3 sons and their wives, and then they've got 10 grandkids. So I've got all of their pictures. And if you look down the left side, so you've got Storm Family Bible, Hans and Ingrid, Chris and Anna, Nick and Lucy, Pete and Molly. And then you've got the grandkids. You've got Eric, and then his love is Tessa. And then you've got Nathaniel, and his love is Darcy. So you can put things behind, you can stack things. It's just, it's a great visual. It's all right here in Scrivener. The next thing I do is, so for each individual main character that I have some sort of a sheet that they fill out, their name, their nickname, ethnic background, when they were born, parents, et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's all in my series Bible right there on Scrivener. This is another thing that when you are writing a series, you want to keep track of how old everybody is, especially if you've got kids. So if you look here, and I can't scroll down because this is just a screenshot, but you can see I've got everybody listed, you know, Greg, Alondra, Alexander, Gina. Now, a couple of them are bold, and that means, so this, Greg, and I think this would be year 3. So I start with year 1 and I list everybody in their age. And then I do year 2, list everybody in their age. Year 3, list everybody in their age. And then the ones that are bold, those are the books that are that take place in that year. And I don't put a year because, you know, in the books, it's just whenever. But I also, if you look down at the bottom, those are the kids, Ryan, Hope, Maddie, Tanner, Jillian. And that's what's really important is, you know, when I first started writing, you can't see under Jillian is Kina, and she was only a year old. But, you know, by, you know, the books that I'm writing now, she's like 3. So at first she's barely toddling around. Now she's walking around and she's talking. So what she can do is very different. My Storms of New England series, they're a very close-knit family, and, you know, all 10 cousins and the aunts and uncles and everything, they try and get together at least once a month for some sort of, you know, family party. They always make an excuse. Oh, we're going to get together for this. So the kids always go off and play. The guys always have a basketball game, you know, and that's where they do their male bonding. So that's the type of stuff that people look for in my books. When they're reading the Storms, it's like, oh, okay, when are we going to have the guys go off and play basketball? You know, because, you know, that's when they're all going to give each other some crap about whoever is the newest or more, you know. And okay, so Eon Timeline is another one. I actually had this a while ago. I'm not huge techie, so it took me a bit. I don't have it anymore, but it is something that if you can figure it out, it's great because it will show you some different timelines. Plotter is another one. I don't have Plotter. I did just download this. For me, looking at this, they go chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't plot by chapter. I plot by event. And that's why I like Scrivener, because I can just put all the different events on those little index cards, and then you literally can just move them around. And anything you've written in that file immediately gets moved around. But Plotter looks like, if you're a linear plotter, then, you know, it looks like something you could use. All right. So how am I doing on time? What do I have till? No idea.
Well, usually it's 2 50-minute workshops.
Okay. Okay, so what's in a name? Oops, sorry. I'm French. I talk with my hands. That's my excuse anyway. All right. So one of the really difficult things when you're writing a series, especially if it's a big series. So my Storm series, it's 7 books now, 3 novellas. The novellas are not storms, but it takes place in the storm world. It's secondary characters from other places. And they're Christmas novellas. So I have those people as well, and you see the storms. Trying to keep track, you know. At one point, I made this is a Google sheet, and I went and I realized that I had the same name twice in a book. Now, granted, they were both very minor, you know, like the guy who ran the garage down the street, or, you know, something like that. But so I ended up going in, and this is how I set up my, you can use Excel or you can use Google. First name, last name, what book they're in, what series they're in. Because like I said, I'm at the point now where I have 6 different series. Plus I have, oh God, probably 50 more books that are planned in the works. So I've already started adding them in. There's a few of them in there, you know, as to, and I, you know, because it's like, oh, I want this name. I don't want to use that. So I'll stick it in there. And then I just give a brief description, you know, and I don't put just the main characters or even the secondary characters. If somebody's name is mentioned, so if you look at the very top, it says Abby Wood, Elusive Dreams. She was made fun of by the Walmart girls. Okay. So at one point, Tessa, the main character, and Eric's mother and grandmother, they're adopting these kids that he rescued from a bombing in Kandahar. And they take her to Walmart to buy stuff. These kids just came over. They don't really have much. They're buying all the stuff for them. And Tessa grew up in foster care and she was never dressed well. She was always made fun of, whatever. So there's a bunch of teenage girls and they're kind of over there, you know, looking at clothes and making fun of them. And they say something like, oh, it looks like something Abby Wood would wear. So Abby's not actually in the story, but I still have her name here because I used it. So anyway, so that's what I do. And what's nice about this is if you know how to use either Excel or Google Sheets, you can go up to the top and it will alphabetize first name, but then you can go over and you can alphabetize the last name. So if you're like, well, what last names did I use? You know, because sometimes I need a name, you know, pick one out of a hat. But did I use it already? Because with 25 books, it's very possible I may have, and I just don't remember because it was something like Abby Wood, who was literally mentioned in 2 sentences. You know, and then you can sort it by book, by series. I don't normally sort it by description because that wouldn't really mean anything. But that's a way to, the only problem with this is that you actually have to keep up with it. And it takes a while to like read through my books. And I know I have a number of books that I still have yet to add to. So, all right. So move on to the muse. Okay. I have a muse on steroids. So this is why people are like, where do you get your ideas from? I have a muse on steroids. This is kind of my life. All right. Where do you get your ideas from? Okay. Personally, I've gotten them while I've been driving. I've gotten them from pictures. So the guy standing on the beach with the kids, that was my inspiration for Elusive Dreams. The guy who adopted the kids that he rescued from Kandahar. The top right, the lady in the sunglasses, that was my inspiration for Death Race. Okay. The guy sleeping, that's my very first book, Wildcat Undercover. The first scene came to me in a dream. And I woke up and I was like, oh, what's going on? So I was like trying to like stay back in that little foggy, you know, state. And I had to, you know, I had to work out. And then I got up and I wrote 10 pages of notes as to what that book was going to be about. Same thing, music. Oh my gosh, you know, I'll listen to songs. Sometimes it's not even the lyrics of songs. My book, True Dreams, is about a guy whose parents are famous rock and roll stars. They're like, you know, Mick Jagger and Janis Joplin. And he left that world because his sister died of a drug overdose, but he still writes music. And so, you know, as I was driving one day, instead of listening to the lyrics, I was thinking about the person who wrote the song and why they would write that song. And that's how that story came about. So there are so many different, you know, ways that you can get inspiration. Like I said, my muse is on steroids. So pretty much every time I turn around, it's like, oh, hey, write about this. You know, it's like, okay, no, I can't. There was only, most of the time it's like, all right, you get put in a pile, you're back there. There was only one time that I had a book that was so powerful and strong that it jumped the line. And that was my book, Jordan Pond, my Rangers of Acadia book. And I had all these other books that I was going to write, and that one just kept hammering away at me. And finally I wrote it. Some of them are much more powerful than others. Sometimes, you know, I'm writing a book and it's like, oh, but I found that, like, so I was writing Death Race, and Keith Cho, he's a Boston cop, very, you know, serious and whatnot, you know, strong silent type. And he wasn't talking to me. I was having a really tough time writing him. And I said, all right, fine. So I put him aside, and I think I started working on maybe one of my Christmas novellas or something. And when I got back, he was like, all right, fine, I'm ready now. And then it was better, and he talked to me a little bit more. And it was interesting because I discovered that, yeah, he's got 3 sisters, and they used to do all sorts of like talent shows, and he knows all the show tunes because he used to have to perform them. I didn't know that about him until after. All right, so some of the things that you need to keep track of, details, and this is where that series Bible comes in. You need to keep track of dates, okay? And not so much, you know, the year, but like, I know when all of my characters' birthdays are, even if I never mention it, because, well, especially with the Storms, like I said, they try and get together, you know, once a month, the whole family. So it's like, oh, look, it's so-and-so's, it's dad's 60th birthday. Let's have you know, I need an excuse. And I just look, who's having a birthday? Okay, we, you know. And again, ages, because you want to make sure that, you know, yeah, you had a baby, but they're not still a baby. There's, you know, or somebody, you know, was pregnant in this book. Well, when are they expecting the baby? I mean, even before, even if I just make that somebody is pregnant, they get added to the Bible as to when they're going to be born, so that from then on, they're in there. So I know, because you need to know, oh, Darcy's over there, she's rocking her daughter Faith, she's 4 months old. You know, how, you know, is she going to be running around? What is she going to be doing? You know?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Oh, sort of compares, companions back to something you were saying before about the details on people. I tend to do less, details sort of to let the people use their imagination, but how much do you feel like you have to fill in about these things you're mentioning?
Well, you know what? I have like a sheet that I've used in the past where I filled it all out. And I find that now I'm more likely, I like to know certain things. You know, I do want to know kind of what they look like. So what color is their hair? How tall are they? What kind of build do they have? You know, if it's a guy or a girl, like what kind of, you know, are they dressing in suits and dresses, or are they more a t-shirt and jeans type of person? I do like to know some of their background. Not
Well, I
all,
mean, for
like,
the reader more. I mean, how much do we need to give them, or should we let them put it together from their actions?
well, you know, and that's up to you. To me, honestly, if it's not relevant to the story,
I see what you mean.
then you probably don't really need it. So the book that my newest Storm book is called Deadly Dreams. And Sophie she's an interior designer, but she had taken dance, you know, all through, you know, school. And now she teaches, you know, on, you know, a couple nights a week and whatnot. And so I put it in, but it ends up being important because at the end, she ends up, you can tell it's a contemporary romance, but Deadly Dreams has a little bit of a suspensey element to it. And she ends up taking out one of the bad guys with like a ballet kick and
wow.
She's got these really strong legs. And so she's always kind of prancing around and whatnot. So my daughter was a dancer, you know, all through school and everything. And so that was important. That was something that I wanted, you know, so if I didn't ever mention that and all of a sudden at the end, it's like, oh yeah, she's got dancers, you know, like their thighs are like muscular and whatnot, you know. So that was important.
I see. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so names, family, even if you never see anybody's families, sometimes you want to know, and that was a good question. How much do we show the readers? You know what? Again, if it's pertinent, you should do it. If you have thoughts that maybe at some point you will do another book and maybe use that family member, then yeah, you might want to introduce them. Just, you know, because if you go through an entire book and you've got, oh, the main character, you know, has siblings, but you never even mention them, and then you have another, you know, oh, I'm going to do this book and it's going to be about their brother. Well, people like, oh, geez, okay, and never knew they had any siblings. So even if you just mention them here and there, you know, it doesn't have to be a ton. You know, my book, Jordan Pond, the guy has a couple of siblings who have kids. I didn't even name them because it wasn't important. It was just that, you know, I named it because his parents were coming to visit. He had a kid and he was like, oh, thank goodness his, you know, his siblings all provided grandkids for his parents, you know, and it was just, so that was just kind of a throwaway. So, you know, that he's got some, so, you know, somewhere down the line, I suppose I could always pull him out, but, you know, so it depends on, this is sometimes where you have to think ahead, you know, with Keith Cho, you know, he has 3 younger sisters and honestly, they're all single. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, could be fodder for another sub-series. Again, that use on steroids. Family pets. Does anybody have, you know, you got to write them down. And so in, again, my Storm series, there's a dog, Freckles, in True Dreams, 2nd book. And in the 4th book, Freckles has puppies. And she has 6 puppies and they all go to family members. Well, I had to name the dogs, what color they were and whatnot. And so I have to keep track of them. It's like, wait, who does, okay, Alex and Gina have honeysuckle and this one has, you know, whatever. So, and physical, does somebody have a scar? Does somebody have whatever? You need to keep track of those things. And if they do have a scar, where is it? What, you know, is it about right, left? Eric is injured. He's got a cane, you know, his left leg. So, you know, he was the first book and here in book 7, he's still walking with the cane because he's got a left leg that's bad. All right. So here again is just another example of, you know, the sheet that I use sometimes. You can use this anywhere. I just stuck it on Scrivener. Okay, so consistency. One of the things that you want to make sure when you're writing a series, okay, is that your word count, okay? If you have, you know, so my Storm series, most of the books are somewhere between 90 and 100,000 words. That's where, you know, that those books lie. If I all of a sudden came out with one of my Storm books and it was like 65,000 words, probably a lot of my readers would be, hey, this is kind of short. It wasn't as involved or whatever as the others. So, or, you know, vice versa. So try and keep your word count. It doesn't mean like they all have to be like, if you write for Harlequin, it's like, well, this series is exactly 65,000 words. No more than that. You have to be very precise. I have friends who write for Harlequin. But keep them in the general vicinity. Same thing with subgenre, okay? Even though, so my Storm series is contemporary, and I do have a tiny bit of suspense in them, but it's still, the contemporary is the main thing. But if you've got a series and it's, you know, it's, you know, a suspense series, and then all of a sudden you got one that's like rom-com and there's no suspense, people are gonna be like, oh, hey, or you throw in a paranormal. Again, that's, you know, you wanna make sure that that subgenre is consistent. Know ahead of time what you want. Heat level, same thing. If you've got readers and if you write really, really sweet, and then all of a sudden you put out a book in the same series and it's scorching, they're going to let you know about it, or vice versa, because they're looking for, you know, that heat level. I mean, that doesn't mean that you know, for whatever reason, the third book in several of my series is the hottest. But I still keep it to, like, for me, my steamy books, no more than 3 sex scenes, you know. And if I get to the point where, oh, they, you know, I might just, you know, suggest, oh yeah, you know, that night that they had, blah, 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 you know, but I don't actually show you the sex scene. So you want to keep that consistent. Again, landmarks, where is this store, you know, how far does it, you know, how far is it to get to whatnot? And then, so I'm going to say types of names, which is something weird, but I took this workshop once, and the person who was giving the workshop, very well-known author, and she said, name your characters by who their parents were, which makes sense because the parents are the ones naming you. Okay. So if you have this character and, you know, her parents were, you know, hippies or whatever, she might be called Meadow or Serenity or something like that. But if she has parents who are, you know, business and down to earth or whatever, her names are going to be very different. Or maybe, you know, if they have a, you know, they're Hispanic or they're Greek or whatever, they're going to have names that reflect that. So in my book, True Dreams, this guy, his parents are huge rock and roll stars. Okay. So he's not going to have a name like Joe. So his name, he goes by TJ, but his name is True Jam Bannister. And he hates it, especially after his sister dies and he decides he's leaving that life. So he goes by TJ, but his name is True Jam, because what would big, huge rock stars name their kid? You know, Apple, Tallulah Bell, you've got, so, all right. So fact or fiction, this is another thing that you have to, when you're writing even just a book, never mind a series, are you using a real thing or are you making it up? So my suggestion, if you are writing about a small town, make it up. Because if you know that there's a small town and you name this small town, so Squamscott Falls is really inspired by Exeter, New Hampshire. But I'm not going to call it Exeter because there's a lot of people in Exeter, and if they read the book, and they're going to be like, yeah, we don't have a store named that, because I changed it to make it the way that I want it to be, but it's inspired by. So it's in a similar location. For a city, it's not as big of a deal. If you know, Boston, New York, whatever, those are ever changing, just as long as you're kind of vague. I mean, unless you've been there and you know exactly where everything is and how everything works, you want to be vague. You don't want to get into it unless you know. Okay, when I write my Storms of New England series, there are some things that I actually can be very specific about because I grew up in New England my whole life. Same thing for country, you know, was it the Princess Diaries? And, you know, she comes from some different country. Agency, okay. If you want, I mean, FBI, CIA, that's all great, but if you're writing some spy novel, whatever, you might almost want to make up an agency versus using a real one if you don't have the information on exactly what would happen. Now, songs, movies, celebrities. This is totally my opinion. first of all, you should know, and most of you probably do know, you cannot use lyrics in a book. I know sometimes people say, oh, you can use up to like 6 or 7. You really can't. You can be vague about it. You know, I have in True Dreams, he calls her Sunshine in the song, You Are My Sunshine. And at one point, you know, he says something and he's like, oh yeah, you make me happy. And she's like, even when skies are gray, you know, so I mean, like they'll talk back and forth, but I don't actually use the lyrics. When you are writing about a song, I read a lot of books and they'll be like, oh, and this song was playing. Well, I don't, you know, I don't know that song. I don't know the people who sing it. You might think, oh, it's hugely popular, but guess what? There's a lot of people who have no idea what it is. So if you are like, oh, the lyrics of this song are great, so I'll just mention the song because everybody will know. Just shocker that there probably will be a lot of people who don't. Same thing with movies or TV shows. I see that a lot. People, you know, name off TV shows or movies, and I'm more likely to, you know, if I'm going to mention a song, I might say, oh, there was a soft ballad playing, you know, oh, there was a love song. And if I'm going to mention the lyrics, it's like, oh, the lyrics are talking about love and commitment, you know, or the lyrics are talking about heartbreak, instead of actually naming them. Same thing, movies. I might say, oh, an old Fred Astaire movie or something like that. Or, you know, some action movie or whatever.
Excuse me, I have a question on that issue there.
Yeah.
What about like nursery rhymes? Can those be quoted directly, do you think? Like,
you have to check to see, like if they're in the public domain, because believe it or not, You Are My Sunshine is not in the public domain. So I couldn't use it because I wanted to. I wanted the guy to, you know, sit down and play it on his piano, and I couldn't because it's not in the public domain. So that's something that you would have to Google.
thank you.
And look up. Yeah. And then celebrities. Like I said earlier, I have a friend who every single one of her heroes looks like Chris Hemsworth or Captain America or whatever. And then somebody else had mentioned, well, you know, how much detail do you give? Honestly, I will never write that my hero or heroine looks like anybody that anybody knows, because I want you to use your imagination. You know, and the thing is, you don't know. If you say, oh, we look like Tom Cruise. Well, you know what? I've never been a Tom Cruise fan. So if you tell me he looks like Tom Cruise, I'm probably going to go, ugh. You know, that's just me. So there's nobody out there that every single person loves and knows and whatnot. So use description, you know, you certainly, oh, he, you know, he had the air of James Bond. That's fine. But there were so many different James Bonds, you know. And again, this is just my opinion. You certainly can do it. But when you do it, you run the risk of, first of all, I have heard somebody used some celebrity in a book and got sued. So you want to be careful for that, especially if it's a negative thing. I actually, my very first book, there was a villain in there who was kind of pasty white and big, and I was going to call him the Pillsbury Doughboy. And then it was like, oh, yeah, no. So we just called him, you know, she just referred to him as Doughboy because it was not a positive thing. So Pillsbury could easily have come in and said, you know, that's a very negative connotation on our name. So you don't want to ever, you know, take the chance of being sued, something like that. But also, you know, give them, give your readers the opportunity to visualize it themselves, because the couple of times that people have written that I then have to go, oh, okay, they look like, you know, and then I have to visualize that person, and then I'm reading and they keep shifting to what I want them to look like, but no, they look like, you know, and it kind of takes me out of the story. So, and especially if, you know, it's like, oh, Hugh Jackman, or, you know, well, Hugh Jackman in what role? Because he's been in so many different roles, you know, so you can, it can get confusing. I want my characters to be themselves. I want it to be the character. I don't want it to be, you know, Brad Pitt or somebody else. Okay, so old friends. Does everybody know the story behind this? This couple was getting married on the beach, and apparently Jason Momoa decided to photobomb them. But the reason I use this is that when you are writing a book in a series, especially when it's later in the series, okay, you're going to have all these old friends come in. Please make sure that you remember whose story it is, okay? It's not their story anymore. That doesn't mean that we don't want to know what's going on with them. We do. But I found I have a good friend who has great series, and I love them all, but there was one series where later it was like, you know, 4th or 5th book. She was giving like a synopsis for every other couple as they came on, you know, as they came on the page. She would sit there and spend like an entire page telling you what their whole story was. And it's like, no, we don't. Let us go back and read it if we haven't already. You know, give a few hints here and there. You know, Tessa, the one that grew up in foster care, she's very agoraphobic, you know, so with her, I might refer and say, you know, oh, I'm glad to see Tessa coming out of her shell after all the foster care she went through. You know, she used to be this. But I don't get into her entire story. I don't get into, you know, everything that they went through. It's, you know, you don't need to retell somebody else's story. So just remember whose story it is. All right, so that's it. This is me. I have a carousel cover art in case anybody is looking for. I have a bunch of pre-made covers online. I also do formatting and promotional graphics and stuff like that. So, but does anybody have any questions on writing a series? Anything that I said? Again, all my opinion, you know, there's no right or wrong way. These are just suggestions. Nope.
Like you said, that one mistake takes a little while. Once you try to speak in fact,
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely important to make sure that you know, because sometimes with 25 books, I haven't kept up with as much of the detail as I wish I did. And sometimes I'm like, oh, crap, what was the name of so-and-so? Or when did they do that? How many years did that hockey team win in a row? And, you know, so I have to go back, and sometimes I have to look in the books, but most of the time I can go into, that's again, why I love Scrivener, because I can go into Scrivener, and if it's not in the Bible, I can go into the story, and each scene is a completely different thing. And each scene has a little tiny, you know, couple of words as to what's in that scene. And so it's like, oh, okay, okay, that happened when, you know, she was getting an ice cream. So I just scroll through, here's the ice cream scene. And then instead of reading through a 100,000 word document, I can just find that one scene, and there it is. There's my information. So just so much easier to find.
Do you have any pointers about cover art? Like things that you must do or must not do?
Honestly, so one of the things that I have done is I try and use the same font for my name in the covers that I make. I have some covers that I have hired graphic designers, but I make a lot of my covers, and I use Felix titling just because, you know, it's bold, it's plain, it's whatever. And so that's consistent for me. You know, some people like more of a fancy font for their name. So you want to be consistent. Make sure that it fits the genre. Make sure that it's appeals to the eye. Don't make it too filled with stuff. That's when I started this cover art business. One of the things is it's simple. I don't put tons of stuff on it. Like I don't do a lot of, like, if somebody wanted, sci-fi or fantasy or whatever, it's like I don't do that kind of cover just because I don't have the skill level for that. Plus, they want, lots and lots of stuff, and that's fine for that genre. So make sure you look at the genre. So Melody, I'm looking at you because you do the sci-fi stuff. So your covers have to have a lot more of that.
My alien heroes have all alienness.
Right, exactly. So that's what you want to do, is go and look and see, what kind of covers do other books in that subgenre have, and just because some of them, so I'm gonna, one of the big covers out there is the Bear Man Chest, and so many people love it. And honestly, if you're writing really, really steamy, kind of erotic, whatever, it's gonna sell. I will never have a cover like that on my book because I just don't like it. It's just not me. I would much prefer to have a couple or a scene. My whole Storm series is all just scenery from New England, So I would just suggest make sure that the words are able to be seen. I have found some books that it's like you have a small thing and you're like, I can't read what that title says because it's in this thin, fancy font and it's not dark enough, or the background is, kind of busy. So yeah, I would just suggest making sure that you can see the title, make sure you can see the author name. And
Kari?
Yes.
Did you design these covers here for Jane?
Yeah, those are covers that you can buy from my site. So the one on the left, High Roller, there's actually 4 of them that are in that series. The second one is, it's those vectors. The second one and the last one are vector covers. So yeah, these are books, these are covers that I designed. They all say Jane Writer, R-I-T-E-R, is, I just use that as a author name on all of my covers. So yeah, you can go, my website is carouselcoverart.com. And I have pre-made. The pre-made ones are not expensive. You get to obviously add your own title, and then your name. And I can tweak them too if there's something on it that you want to change a color or something. And then I can also design covers as well. Those are a little bit more because obviously that would take a little bit more time. So depending on if you have a cover that is just one picture, that one in the middle right there, that honestly is just a picture. And, I made sure I cropped it right and, put the different things on it. So that one right there, I believe is only $40, which is pretty cheap for a cover. So.
Okay, they look good. Thank you.
All right.
Does it always have to be?
On the cover? No, I said my Storm series is locations. I got a lighthouse, I got benches on the beach, so you don't have to have people on the cover at all. That's actually becoming quite popular. So it depends on what you're writing. It depends on, I wouldn't use an idyllic scene if you're writing suspense or mystery. Unless it's kind of like a broken down old house that looks kind of haunted or something. So yeah. Yep. All right. So take a 5-minute break. Okay, so this workshop is called Accurate Portrayal of People with Disabilities in Literature. So I have a sister who is deaf. My daughter is, or was a teacher of the deaf. She is Dr. Emily Moran. She's actually Dr. Emily Horlehy now because she got married. She helped me develop this workshop. I was a teacher for 30 years, so I had many, many children in my classes with disabilities. And I developed this workshop because I would sometimes read books that had a person with a disability in it, and it was just like, I just want to throw the book against the wall because it's like, oh, no, it's wrong. So we're just going to touch base on a bunch of different things as to what you really have to make sure when you are writing a person with disabilities in your book, whether it's a main character or a secondary character or just a walk-on character. Okay, so the first thing is there are legal and educational things that you have to remember, okay? The American Disabilities Act, you can read it. It basically says that you have to provide all this stuff for people if they have a disability, okay? And you have to provide reasonable accommodation. Okay, so reasonable accommodation can be something like interpreter services, accessible parking and entrances, accessible restrooms, braille signs, auditory walkways, priority seating, things like that. Okay, not reasonable accommodation is allowing people to have their support animals or free private transportation or separate viewings or meetings or things like that. Okay. So there are different types of accommodations. So again, building entrances, restrooms, parking, sidewalks, hotel rooms, website reading material. Okay, so there are some people who, you know, have visual impairments and they need special you know, websites that are built to accommodate them or reading material. Then you have your non-physical, which is like interpreter. So if you have somebody who's deaf or even has a different language, there is a place, so askjan.org tells you about workplace accommodation, sensory friendly, okay? Oh, actually, so some of the accommodation can be like working remotely or restructuring somebody's job. Maybe working the counter versus a drive-through if somebody has auditory issues. As long as it doesn't require hiring another person, it's a reasonable accommodation, okay? Sensory friendly might be like providing a space that's quieter, has a higher level of light or filters out light. Okay, so as you can see, on the left, compliant, they have, when you have a wheelchair van or car or whatever, they need access to actually get that out. If they don't have room to drop their ramp, then you know, it's not going to help. On the right, you've got a handicap space and they put a dumpster in it. So sticking a sign on something doesn't make it compliant. Like just putting up a sign that says handicap parking doesn't make it compliant. Okay. The White House Rose Garden, there was a lot of flack given to Mrs. Trump when she moved some stuff in the Rose Garden. But the thing is, she moved it, and now for the first time in history, the White House Rose Garden is ADA compliant. That's why she moved them, because they were that's why she didn't get rid of them. She moved them so that it is now ADA compliant, and people didn't understand why that happened. Wheelchairs, things like that. Yeah, because it was not before. So it was not ADA compliant. There was actually, Melody, I think you were there last year when we went to Coastal Magic, and there was this hotel, And they had stairs that went up, and then they had this ramp that went down. But right next to the ramp was this big, huge vase thing. And I'm looking at, and I'm going, how the heck is a wheelchair gonna get around this to go down the ramp? No, well, that's right. We had wagons that we would, and we were pulling them, and we couldn't get it around this base in order to get onto the ramp. So I'm looking at this, and of course, I'm taking pictures to show my daughter who, you know, think this is not ADA compliant. Okay, so there is another, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So, what this does is it says that all children have access to a free and appropriate public education. So any child that has a disability is required by law to get an appropriate education for free. And the school system has to provide what they get. All right, it covers children from birth to 22. They have the family service plan up to age 3, and then an IEP, individualized education plan for the children from 3 up to 22. There's also something called a 504 plan. As a teacher, I had to deal with this a lot. It was accommodations without direct specialized instruction. So putting the kids in a certain place in class, interpreter service, extra reminders. I have to say sometimes it was a pain because it was mostly, oh, hey, you're a teacher. Yes, I know you have 25 kids in your class and you're only supposed to have 22. But we have this child that has a 504, so you literally need to walk around behind them all day and help them, which was not always helpful. Usually that child should have had an IEP, but sometimes the school didn't want to do it. So there is a book, I'm not going to tell you the name of the book, that I had read, and it was by an author who I absolutely love, and I was so excited because she had told me she, you know, was going to write this book about, and her hero was deaf, and having a sister who was deaf, and all of her friends are deaf, and, you know, my daughter, deaf education teacher, my stepmom, deaf education interpreter, ASL interpreter. So I was excited, and then I read the book and I was like, oh my God, I wanted to throw it against the wall like the entire time that I was reading it. Unfortunately, it was on my Kindle and I didn't want to break my Kindle. So one of the things I noticed, somebody had written, somebody who obviously had a lot of information about deaf people had written this huge, like 2-star review. And it was very professionally worded, but I'm going to read from that a couple of times just to show. The hero decided to voice off permanently in kindergarten. Many deaf people do voice off, but not because the kids made fun of them when they were 5. Okay, as a kindergarten teacher for 20 years, kids don't make fun of you because you can't speak. Most children at that age still have speech impediments of some kind. Kindergarten is way too early for a kid to decide something like that. Instead, he likely would have tried much harder in speech and requested hearing aids to be more like the other kids. I don't have a clue why he didn't use them. Even when children have a profound hearing loss, they often are encouraged to keep wearing them for environmental clues. So here's this book, and in this book, this boy decides at the age of 5 that he's not going to talk anymore. He's only going to use sign language. Well, I'm like, well, where's his special education teacher? Where's his, like, how is he learning sign language? He comes from a hearing family. At 5, he's got to have somebody teaching him sign language, because guess what? Deaf kids don't come out of the womb knowing how to speak sign language. It's like if you know, a child was born in China and you took them at birth and brought them to the United States, they're not going to know how to speak Chinese, right? So it was just a presumption that, you know, this child was fluent in sign language, but nobody in the classroom. And the little girl was in the, you know, the heroine was in the class, and she decided she was going to teach herself sign language to talk to this boy. So it was just kind of ridiculous. Anyway. All right. Oh, another, it said the hero's teacher tried their best to face him so he could read their lips, sign if they knew any. So he would have had an ASL interpreter in the classroom every day, minimally, if not a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. It's a legally mandated requirement if he's a fluent signer, and that is a primary mode of communication. So again, it was ridiculous that, you know, he was in this classroom and had absolutely nobody helping him do anything. All right. So when we're talking about disabilities, there are physical disabilities, biological disabilities. So we've got congenital versus acquired. So congenital, born with it. So spina bifida is something that you are born with. Spinal cord injury is something that you get later in life. They both can have similar similar problems. A limb difference is somebody who was born with their limb, not fully developed, whereas an amputation, it was cut off. Cerebral palsy, you are born, usually there's some sort of trauma at birth, or you can have a brain injury. Brain injury is you get it later in life. You can be born deaf, you can become deaf later in life. Same thing, born blind, or you can have a vision impairment from a disease or an accident or something. So when you are writing your character, whether it's secondary or a main character, if they have a disability, how did they get it? What is it from? Were they born with it? Did they get it later? Okay, you want to make sure that you have this information. All right, so there are lots of different adaptations that you can use depending on what your character has. Wheelchairs, walking aids, vehicles. There are all sorts of home adaptations that you might need. If somebody's in a wheelchair, they might need some sort of a lift to get them in and out of bed. Alexa, smartphones, computers. These have all really helped people a lot. I know my sister was never able to talk on the phone. We did have a TTY, and if you don't know what a TTY is, it was this little machine that looked kind of like a typewriter, and it had these two round spongy things, and you would take your phone off the wall, off the hook, and you would stick it in there, and you would type, and it would send this code to either somebody else who had a TTY, or you could send it to a translator who would then translate it. And that's how we needed to talk to somebody. Sometimes my sister would call, if she wasn't home, she would use what was called the relay officer. So she would have her TTY and she would do that to the relay officer, and then the relay person would call me and she would voice what my sister Annie was typing. It was actually kind of weird because I'm not talking to my sister, I'm talking to somebody else, but she is quoting word for word what my sister is saying. So when you talk back, you're supposed to say, okay, Annie, I'll pick you up at the train station, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes you'd be like, okay, well, tell her that I'll pick her up. You know, it was awkward. But once like Blackberries and then texting now, I mean, I can sit here and have this huge conversation with her just by texting back and forth. So it's just so much easier for deaf people. So, and honestly, I think even for people with visual, because, you know, my son bought me a new phone. It's so great. And it has the voice to text, which is, you know, I've got big fat thumbs, and, you know, but it's nice too, because then somebody with, you know, a visual impairment can talk into it, and I'm sure they have something that will also read it back to them. So, you know, Alexa, shut off the lights. How would a blind person know if the lights were on or off? I mean, they probably wouldn't turn them on if they were home, but if somebody else had come over, they would have turned the lights on, and you don't know. And you could be walking around, you know, in your house and the lights were on and you don't know it. So, okay. So, atrophy and limitations. Okay. So I have this picture here. If you guys know, this is, what is it? Grandpa Joe from Willy Wonka. Okay, so Grandpa Joe and the other grandparents have been sitting in this bed for what, years and years, it said. Suddenly he gets up and he's walking and doing a jig. Okay. Just absolute nonsense. And so I'm actually going to read, because again, this book that will remain. And the reason it drives me nuts is that I offered to help this person. And I said, oh, I've got a deaf sister. I know about it. Let me know if you have any questions or if you want me to read anything. And she never did. And out comes this book. And I'm like, you know. So anyway, this is another part of whoever that person was. The hero hasn't voiced in 25 years. The larynx is a muscle in the throat that houses the vocal cords, which are tissues that move with the larynx and produce some vibrations when air is passed through them. You can tell this person has quite a bit of knowledge. The muscles in the hero haven't been used in 25 years. Now imagine not walking or using your leg muscles for 25 years. You decide to get up and walk one day, you'll fall right over because those muscles can no longer sustain the type of movement or function you want. This is exactly the same for the hero's larynx and vocal cords. If he did not speak for 25 years, there is no possibility of his speech being intelligible when speaking to the heroine. It wouldn't sound deeper or like a different dialect. It would only be a series of grunts and moans and shrieks because he would have no control over these muscles. Since the hero has never heard spoken English, he would not even begin to be able to mimic spoken language. So this woman has the hero at the end of the book decide he's going to get up and give a speech at his brother's wedding. He hasn't spoken in 25 years. He has never heard spoken language. And from what it sounds like in the book, I'm like, why did he not have a speech language pathologist? Like he should have had speech all those years. So again, kind of because you've got the atrophy. All right. Now, aside from physical things, you've got psychosocial and developmental differences. So anxiety, PTSD, which PTSD is not just for war victims, okay? They can be for abuse, war, accidents, violence, okay? In my book, Elusive Dreams, the hero, he has a cane, he was in a bombing, so he's got some PTSD, but the heroine was in a lot of really bad foster care, and she's very agoraphobic. She does not like people, she does not like touch. The kids in school would tease her, call her no touch Tessa. So, so there's spots in here where she also has PTSD. So in my book, I'm realistic. I don't ever, I mean, 7 books later, Eric is still walking with a cane, you know, and they both go to therapy because she needs it too. Okay, also substance use, addiction, my book, True Dreams, the guy who's rock and roll parents, he's an alcoholic and a drug addict. He's been clean for 7 years, but he still is one. And so you have to, you know, you have to make sure that that's covered in there. Mood disorders, depression, bipolar. Marianne Rice has a book, oh God, I can't remember the name of it, that deals with a guy who has depression, and it's done very, very well. Psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, delusions. So these are all different things. And so one of the things that you have to worry about whether it's a main character or a secondary character, what are the reactions of the other people around them? How were these people raised? Okay. So in Stolen Dreams, Alex has severe OCD, kind of borderline autism, ASD. But very loving family, you know, lots of support, you know, lots of tools to help him get by, etc. He's been able to function. But yet, so Tessa grew up in this, you know, with horrible foster care. So she did not ever have that loving family. She did not ever have that support. So here she is at the beginning of the book, you know, still a mess, you know, emotionally a mess. So, and again, 7 books later, she's still shy and introverted and, you know, timid, but little by little, she's come out of her shell because it's not going to happen overnight. All right. Oh, here we go. This is right there. What makes us stronger? I put it up there because that's the one with the guy who has the depression, and it's fabulous. Elusive Dreams, that's my PTSD, and she's got agoraphobia. Fiona Marsden's book, Tell Me No Lies. She was in an accident and has a lot of walking difficulties. Down at the bottom, Lee Kilrain, Give a Little. The heroine has a brain injury. Oh my God, it was done so well. Really great book. Broken Dreams, the little boy has autism. And actually the heroine had like an addicted mother and other things. Perfect Silence is my book that is about a deaf woman. This is a new series called Sounds of Silence, and it's a family of all deaf. The parents are deaf, and 3 out of the 4 children are deaf. So the second book will be coming out hopefully later this year when I finish writing it. So when you choose your disability, if you decide you want to give somebody a disability or whatever, you know, research it, because if you've met one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism. So think about when you choose your disability, what is it going to be a main character? Is it going to be a secondary character? What is the degree of severity? Okay, because let's just use autism. I mean, there are kids who, you know, are autistic. I have a nephew who is autistic. He taught himself to speak Russian when he was 4. You know, but yet he has a hard time functioning in a classroom. You know, he is getting better. Oh my God, he's up north. When I was home, I saw him quite a bit this summer. And at one point he goes over to his mom. He's like, Mom, can I hug Auntie Karen? And it was like, oh my God, because that is not his typical, you know, like I see my grandkids, whatever, we're all a huggy kissy family because we're all French. And, but that's not Sam. And the fact that he wanted to come and give me a hug. And then when I saw him after that, he would just come right over and he'd give me a hug. And he's like 12, 13 now. I think he'll be 13 in a couple of weeks, you know? So autism also, the way my sister described it, because my sister has a son, and then my brother also has a son who is autistic, but they're very different kids. It's like a snowflake. You know, and you can have a couple of these and a couple of these, and maybe some of these, and it's not all one size fits all. So you have to decide, you know, what degree of severity. Also, what level of disclosure. Okay, so if it's a secondary character, you probably don't have to have tons and tons of details. You're just going to use, this is, you know, but do make sure that you've done some research on it. Okay, here we go. So labeling, correct terminology. Most of the time you want to do the what they call person first. So, or people first. Person with autism versus autistic. Person with a visual impairment versus a blind person. Although I'm going to tell you, deaf people want to be called deaf. They don't want to be a person with deafness. Okay, because deaf pride, baby. They are, let me tell you. They don't see anything wrong with them. You know, and so my first book, Perfect Silence, she is from this all deaf family. Parents are deaf, siblings are deaf, all of her friends are deaf. And she gets cochlear implants. Huge controversy in the deaf community because the deaf people feel like there is nothing wrong with them. They don't need to be fixed. So if you get cochlear implants, you're a traitor. So here she is in this family. Now they love her, but she's a traitor. She's got a brother who constantly, oh, you're all hearing now. But the fact is that cochlear implants do not make you not deaf. you are still deaf. You take them off, you cannot hear anything. Okay, even when you have them in, if you're in a big room, if there's lots of people, it's like having 27 tabs open on your computer and all of them are playing different things. So, you know, don't make it, oh, she has cochlear implants. Like in my book, Perfect Silence, you know, I've had a lot of people, that one just sells itself half the time. And people are always like, oh my God, this is like, yes, it's not just, it's not, everything isn't perfect, okay? So. Right, right. And she speaks very clearly. I actually kind of modeled her. There was an old show on called Sue Thomas FBI, but it's FBI, EYE. And I loved it, loved it, loved it. Deanne Bray was the main character. And actually, she is married to Troy Kotzer. Troy Kotzer just won whatever the big award, yes, so CODA, C-O-D-A, stands for child of a deaf adult. So I am a SODA, I'm a sister of a deaf or a sibling of a deaf adult. So, yeah, so Troy Kotzer, who won the award for that, is married to Deanne Bray. So I was thrilled to see, and he would show up on her TV show every now and then. It's just, that's a great show. Anyway, so make sure that when your characters with disabilities, make sure you're portraying them accurately. Make sure but you have to make those decisions. What level are they going to be at? Because even with deafness, some people, or my sister has no hearing whatsoever. Okay, other people are hard of hearing. They might have hearing in one ear and not the other, or whatever. And even then, there's different levels. So some people can be helped just by hearing aids. Other people need other things. And think about, what do your characters need to do? Okay, if you want your character to be able to do X, Y, and Z, then make sure you don't give them a disability where it's impossible for them to do it. Okay, make sure that they ask for help if they need it. There's no shame in asking for help. Also, love does not fix your disability. Okay, this right here is, you know, oh, they were in an accident and they, you know, this happened, and, you know, all of a sudden you're going to be cured because, you know, you have love now. And they need to learn to live with each other's disabilities. Okay, in Stolen Dreams, Alex and Gina, Alex is the one, he's totally OCD. Every single quirk he has, I have. So, but he's also like almost borderline spectrum-y. And Gina is this flighty, bohemian, whatever, but she accepts him with all his quirks. So actually, I think, all right, so this was, somebody left me a review for Stolen Dreams. The really interesting thing is the author's take on Alex. As you move further along in the book, it becomes very clear that Alex isn't your average control freak. This studious, thoughtful man we've been slowly getting to know has a very real condition that he's living with his whole life. What I love about it, though, is the author's choice not to dwell on it. There's no real diagnosis, no listing of facts and statistics on adults living with his disorder. He is who he is. No diagnosis in the world can change that. As a mother of a child with a diagnosis, it's refreshing. Alex is Alex, and my son is still my son. No letters of the alphabet will ever change how I see him. Okay, and then Broken Dreams has a little autistic boy, and this was another review. And the skill the author shows in the way she handles Tanner's condition is astounding. For a 3-year-old who is only learning to speak, Tanner's voice often seems like the loudest, the one with the most depth. And then, so the next review is one for, this is about, again, another author that I love, she wrote a story and the main character was autistic, which I kind of was like he was very aware of the fact that he didn't, oh, well, I don't read visual clues that well, and I don't understand emotion and voice. Like, he was very aware of that. I'm like, the whole autistic thing is they're not aware. But this, and again, I don't know who wrote it, but it says, it really and truly felt like the author took every cliche stereotype she has heard about individuals with autism over the years and attributed them to her character whenever it was convenient. It felt so disingenuous, ill-researched, an insincere attempt at representation. You don't want those reviews on your book if you have, people with disabilities in there. You want to make sure that you have researched. Okay. Okay, so here, how are we going to research? Interview multiple people. Okay, so people who have to deal with that disability, so nurses, doctors, teachers. Interview people with a disability. Okay, even though my sister is deaf and I know all of her friends, and my daughter was a teacher of the deaf, and my stepmom is an interpreter, I still got all sorts of information. My daughter, when she went to school to be a teacher of the deaf, she had another friend there who was deaf and who got cochlear implants, as a late teen. And so we had lots of discussion. She had this whole blog she had written. I made sure to read it and take notes and do all this stuff. I didn't just assume that because I know a deaf person that I knew all this information. Interview family members. And that's not just to get information about, the disability, but how people around them act. And that's really important too. Because one of the things that I noticed in that book about the deaf hero, is that here's this deaf hero. Nobody in his family is deaf. None of his friends are deaf, yet everybody signs fluently. And I'm like, really? Because my mother doesn't sign and she has a deaf child. I sign a little bit. I haven't lived with my sister in like 36 years. So, I've forgotten a lot of it. I used to sign a lot more, but it's not just automatic that, somebody deaf, so therefore you're going to sign, and I know so many people who it's like, oh, I met so-and-so, they're deaf, I'm going to take a sign language class. Well, one class isn't going to do it, because one class you're going to learn the alphabet, you're going to learn numbers, and you're going to learn how to say hello and goodbye, and how are you, and oh, I'm fine. So yeah, you need to talk to the family members. How do people react? How do family members feel about that person and their disability? Has it, how was it raising this child, or how was it being a sibling to this child? Teachers, social workers, people who have actually dealt with this disability, other authorities, Facebook and social media groups. Okay, I have been on a couple of Facebook groups for people who are, deaf, or, who want to learn sign language, professional journals, nonfiction books. I would say fiction books, except for that, some of them are wrong. And I got really annoyed when I heard this book about the deaf guy was being made into a movie in Germany or something. And I'm like, but it's completely incorrect. Okay. So, timeline, okay? Do not have a miracle cure. Don't diminish the validity of the person's disability, okay? I mean, that doesn't mean that if something happens or in an accident, that they can't get better, but it's not going to be tomorrow. It's not, there's too much of this, the love of a good woman is gonna, especially, I really have a problem when I read a book about a woman who has been either violently beaten or raped or whatever. And next thing you know, I mean, I actually read one by a big, huge name author. And the woman still had bruises from her ex. And she meets this guy and they have hot monkey sex for the week. And all of a sudden, everything is just hunky-dory. She's still got the bruises and she's having sex with a stranger. Like, you know, same thing. It's like somebody's been raped or, you know, horribly molested or whatever. This person is not going to want to be having sex right away. There's going to be a lot of issues to work through. Okay, so don't just, you know, the love of a good woman or the love of a good man is great, but can we be realistic about timelines? Like I said, Eric was in a bombing, he had a fractured pelvis and a shattered kneecap, and 7 books later, he's still walking with a cane. Guess what? If I make 20 books in that series, he's still going to be walking with a cane because the injury that he had. And I checked it with my cousin, who is a physical therapist. She read through the whole thing, made sure it was all accurate. And she goes, yep, too much damage. And it doesn't matter what you do. He's always going to have that cane. So, and also consistency throughout the series. So make sure that if they've got whatever disability they have earlier, they still have it later, or whatever, you know, problems they have, that they don't just go away. A friend asked me to read a book that she was writing, and it was a, you know, YA, and there were these kids, and one of them was deaf, and she went from this person not being able to hear at all, if somebody is standing there, to being able to understand them over there. And I'm like, oh, honey, consistency. Like, it doesn't, if you want the person to be more hard of hearing versus deaf, like, that's fine, but please be consistent, you know, make sure you know how far away, you know, whether it's hearing or visual, or, you know, maybe somebody's in a wheelchair, but maybe they can still get up and, you know, walk with canes or whatever, but how far? They're obviously not going to be climbing up and down the stairs. So you need to be consistent. Also, past history. What is the history of this person? Okay. If things happen in the past, whatever, do the research or don't mention it. It's okay to be vague, but make sure that you're accurate. So that's it. So basically the bottom line is just do your research. Do your research, make sure you ask the right people. You know, make sure that you're consistent. It's just so important. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Well, I was just thinking that if you're writing historical, you might want to do research if you want all these laws being in, because that could be part of the conflict. It's like
100%. 100%. You're writing historical. So I had a friend who just wrote something that took place like World War II. And she had, it was just a secondary character, very, like, mostly just kind of came on and off the page. But she did ask me, because she was like, well, this is what I wanted to have, and this child was deaf. And I'm like, okay. And they were like doing all the sign language, but it was like way back, you know. So I'm like, well, all right, hold on, let me ask my daughter, because she has a lot more of the knowledge of, I mean, you know, she's got a degree in it. So, and she was like, yeah, you know, back then, if somebody was deaf, they probably would have put him in an institution. And but this, she's like, well, they became deaf when they were older due to, you know, whatever, one of the, you know, diseases back then. And I said, okay. I said, well, so then they probably will be able to speak, because, you know, if, as long as you learned language, you can still speak. My daughter's best friend is deaf, but did not become deaf until she was 14. And she is super clear, you know, and she reads lips like a ninja. You talk to her and you would never realize that she was deaf, because she speaks beautifully, and she's a dancer, but she dances according to the beat and, you know, visual, you know, cues and things like that. So, yeah. So are there any other questions? Yeah, all right, well, thank you very much.